and welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about John Herdman being signed for Toronto FC, and we're also going to be talking about the expansion team in Saskatchewan being adjourned for being paused, or most likely be not being in the Canadian Premier League as an expansion team, and also the battle for 5th spot for the Canadian Premier League playoffs. But first, here's your fixtures rundown. York United loses to Valor FC 3-1. Pacific FC draws with Halifax Wanderers 1 apiece. Forge FC draws with Calgary FC, being scoreless. Vancouver FC defeats Atletico Ottawa 2-1. And now we have our guest, Jason Whissell, from That's Not Bad.
Thanks,
it's not
Jacob.
bad.
It's not that bad. Thanks, Jacob, for having me again.
Even for this podcast, it's not really that bad.
It's all good. It's all well, unless it's TFC, then it could be, potentially be bad.
Or maybe that's for the signing for Toronto FC coming in October. John Herdman, it's really not that bad for that signing.
Oh, the signing isn't bad at all. I mean, having John Herman come in to hopefully right the ship next year for TFC, because let's be honest, this year is a complete and utter write-off entirely. But I mean, the question becomes for John Herdman, how do you right this ship? And how do you sell this rebuild, which is going to have to be, you have to think, to the fans? And we already saw earlier this year, Toronto fans really not happy with the way the TFC has been playing on the pitch, and rightfully so. It's been an abomination, really, all year. John Herdman has his work cut out for him, and I'm hesitant because if you think about it, the work he's done, at the FIFA level, it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's good, but it's a little bit easier when you have the best of the best playing for you. Here, he's walking into a situation that feels, for Star Trek fans who will appreciate this, like the Kobayashi Maru, like the unwinnable situation, because it's going to take time. It's going to, John Herman isn't going to come in and make TFC a playoff contender next year. I do not see that happening unless there are a ton of new major signings next year. But I mean, if you're looking at this, Jacob, what's the very first thing you do? Like the minute the team is fully yours, what's the first thing you do?
When I think about it, what you first have to do is basically get to know the players, what their role is, what basically try to adjust what their position are, what really actually is their best position in the formation. And I think that really has to realize what John Herdman is trying to go think, but it really does sum out that you're going to really have a big part of it when you're going to be in that head coach role. Right now, he's just on the sidelines with Terry Dunfield just doing all the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of actually hilarious that right now Terry Dunfield already has his record. He's got his first win, and it'll be like Terry Dunfield be like, did that win actually help me? Because John Herdman give me some pointers there. He's just whispering it. Okay, just listen to me. Everything what I have to do.
It's funny you mention it that way, because I think this is a fascinating situation. Normally, when you get your new coach, and this is going to be the guy on the sidelines running the team for the for the foreseeable future, you normally see them like jump right in and no longer have the interim carrying out the year. At least not once it's already been announced that they're going to be the coach for the next season. Here, you have a situation where Herdman has the ability to, rather than jump right in and have to deal with how do we win now, it's a matter of being able to sit back and watch everything without necessarily being on the sidelines and trying to manage the game. Here, he's able to analyze the game at first and, figure out a game plan, figure out what's working and what isn't working. So when it's full on his time, he already knows the strengths and weaknesses of TFC currently and where those changes need to be happening.
Yeah, even for there was some sources that Terry Dunfield might be part of the staff for John Herdman.
Oh, it makes total sense, especially if Dunfield is, if Herdman is feeding a couple little tips here and there or saying, hey, let's try this, let's try this. If Dunfield has the ears of the players, it makes sense to keep Dunfield on his staff. If he's, contributing to a more positive situation on the pitch, that doesn't necessarily mean wins or even draws. That just means that the players are playing for him. Win or lose, if the players are positively playing for the coach, that's a good start, right? And if Herdman is feeding Dunfield some strategies and it works, and Dunfield is open to listening from Herdman, then yes, then you have a symbiotic relationship, and that's good as well.
Yeah, and now I know lots of fans see some good side of it about the Toronto FC. Now just to Canadian soccer fans see some good and bad, because John Herdman, he was like the best coach out there for the national team.
Mm-hmm.
And it does questions for the national team, who's going to take that role now?
That's going to be interesting because you're going to need to figure that one out and figure it out fairly fast. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some eyes at the Canadian Premier League level and seeing some of those coaches and what they're doing down there and maybe bringing them into the national team situation. I think that's actually not a half bad idea, especially, you take a look at the continued dominance of some of the teams like Cavalry and Forge, and sit there and go, if it's working there, wonder what they'd be able to do with if there's any already relationships going on with any of those coaches, with any of the players at the national team level, why not? Especially if you have CSB like so intertwined with the national team, like it would make sense.
Well, right now you have the assistant coach for the Canadian national team. I think it was it's right now Marco, who was the coach for Montreal Impact.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some at this point that you think about it. Who you think that could be that head coaching job? And there's a lot of potential for coaches in the Canadian Premier League. Like you have Bobby Smarionis, and you have Tommy Wheeldon Jr., and the list goes on for coaches that are in the Canadian Premier League. But really shocked to it is just like there's Stephen Hart in that list of coaches that did the head coaching job for it, and I think people still look at that list of what head coaches did the national team, and Stephen Hart is in there. He coached for the Halifax Wanderers.
So I guess the question becomes, if you're on the spot right now and you have to pick one coach out of the CPL, doesn't matter which team. If you're the one in charge, picking a head coach from the CPL to take over.
Well, and I forgot to mention, like, James Merriman is also a good good one for the Pacific FC. That's
Hmm.
also a good list to put on the short list national team job. Like I mentioned, 3 already. Like there is so much good potential, but some Canadian soccer fans do not basically sometimes do not see that potential if it's the Canadian Premier League. But there's still some Canadian soccer fans are risking to have some of their players that are playing in the Canadian Premier League to take that role to be mentioned, like Dominic Zator, um, John like John Waterman, who basically entered the FIFA World Cup
I mean, I guess
potential.
the question then becomes to, you know, at what level of competition do you want your coach to be? And I recognize that that's probably more a question on the player side. You know, you're going to want players that, you know, obviously play at a high level as far as their level of competition. You can be the best player of your team in a semi-pro league. That doesn't necessarily mean you can handle it at, you know, the national level. But when it comes to coaching, it's really more about strategies. So I guess the question is, does it really matter which league you're getting a national team coach from, so long as they come in with a solid game plan?
If you're talking about, for example, a coach from a semi-pro, like someone had a experience in the semi-pro, there were, for example, the Halifax Wanderers that coach for Vaughan Missouri, Patrice Geyser. That's even a potential one.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, and to put it out there, is that if you take a look at the roster for the men's national team, and you have to ask yourself, like, where are these players coming from? You know, what leagues are they currently playing in? And if there is a familiarity, like if you have a majority of your players from the CPL or from MLS, you know, maybe you're looking for a coach who perhaps, you know, is more familiar with them because they play, you know, they either coach them or they play against them on a regular basis. Knowing your strengths and your weaknesses on your current roster, I think is going to help ease that transition. And you have to think that Herdman probably will be in contact with whoever takes over that job to pass off any notes that they have to, you know, in order to be able to help ease that transition. But you also have that tournament coming up faster than you can possibly think. You know, it'll be here before you know it, and all of a sudden you've had to switch gears with someone else calling the shots. How much is that going to affect? I mean, already there are questions with, you know, Canada going into this next tournament and go, how well are they going to do? It's Do you think that this coaching change, you know, needs to be solved sooner rather than later?
Yeah, it's one good question, but matter of fact, there is also a lot of controversies right now in the Canadian Soccer Association. If any coaches are willing to take that role of the amount of money that they're going to give to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the interesting situation too. Like there are so many, and we've talked about this on the show before. There are so many financial issues with Canada soccer right now that anyone who steps into that role, no matter the credentials that they bring in, and no matter how well intentioned they may be in order to be able to achieve a good result on the pitch, you knowingly are walking into a situation that, again, feels like a Kobayashi Maroon. I get that's the second time I've made that reference today, but you know, it's not going to be easy. You are going to be dealing with external problems that you as a manager cannot control. So aside from making sure that you're managing the strategy on the pitch and managing the players and trying to get the best out of them, you also have to unfortunately deal with all of this outside, out of your realm problems that you're going to have to try to separate those problems from, you know, trying to get the best team on the field. Like it cannot be easy. To the same token as well, Herdman, in going from the national team to TFC, is going from like one flaming hot frying pan to another flaming hot frying pan, just slightly different things on fire there. If you're looking at restocking TFC or changing some things around, making some trades, making some strategy changes, you're talking a team right now that is the second worst team in MLS. Not the worst, but it ain't that far off. And anyone who's looking for a new team, if they're, depending on where they are in their career, you take a look at where TFC is, and you know it's going to take at least a year or two before they even think about playing for a playoff spot, at least. How willing are you to jump into a rebuild situation as a player, dependent on where you are in your career? And how much are they going to have to lean on foreign transfer markets and non-Canadian players? Like, there's so much you're going to have to sit there and juggle, and you wonder how, what are the growing pains going to be with Herman at TFC, and with whoever takes over the head coaching job in with the national team.
That is like, there's always fans going always going to say that, and they're always going to try to answer something about that question.
And that's the thing too.
And it just goes in spiral. Where?
Yeah, I mean,
who
for the last 4 years, right? And really, you may be able to trace this back to TFC's, MLS championship. The
Greg Vanny,
right? No, but honestly, like, if you take a look at this Canadian soccer fandom has really been building since that point, when TFC became a legitimate threat in MLS, like championship threat, and it really raised the level of fan interest in soccer. And I'm not saying like all of a sudden, Toronto FC wins it and everyone's like, oh, what's the soccer game? No, I mean, there were always soccer fans, but I'm talking about, the Canadian fever pitch, if you will.
Like, I think there was not just Toronto FC.
Mm-hmm.
It was, to be honest, it was a battle of which Canadian team is the best.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we could go back every single time for the best Canadian team in the Canadian Championship, and it was most likely to be always the battle for Montreal and Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, and you see right now how Montreal is. It was going to be Montreal doing more better. Then later, you have this era. Toronto FC is now doing better. Mm. It's the best team of all time for Canada.
Right.
Because now you look at 2017. That's where that's the year that they basically won that slogan, best Canadian team of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've won the treble. But I think, like, when you look at Montreal right now, they were the first Canadian team to make the finals in the Champions League, but basically blown out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Toronto FC makes it to the champions, CONCACAF Champions League. Right now, it's going to be the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Mm.
And had a possibility to win it in 2018. And now you're looking at Vancouver Whitecaps, not really a good team in the Canadian Championship. They've won their third title in the Canadian Championship, and now you're seeing the Canadian Premier League now rising. Forge FC almost won it,
mm-hmm.
which basically was a battle for Toronto FC and Forge FC. To be honest, I think that now you're seeing more popularity in Canadian Premier League that is going to thrive more if they're playing in the Canadian Championship and even when it's the playoffs.
I mean, the CPL has a great product, and there's no denying that. But I don't think, and I may get a little flack for saying this here, but I don't think any team's success at the CPL level is going to drive the national soccer narrative. At the MLS level, it's a different story, right? When TFC was, either in the finals or winning championship, the constant talk in Toronto was soccer, 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 until, of course, the Raptors won their championship. But I think it's one of those things where if Montreal or Vancouver can start to make a lot of noise, in MLS as well, while TFC is recovering, if you will, or rebuilding, then I think for the national team level, the interest will still be up, and fans will be able to ignore, at least the fans will be able to ignore the financial problems. But if all three MLS teams on the Canadian side, north of the border, start to falter, and they're either not making the playoffs or they're there for a hot minute and then it's clear that they don't belong there, you're going to see, I think, the interest level. And adding to this as well, and it's nothing to do with the Canadian soccer players, sports fan interest levels, or at least their attention span, if you will, can be easily diverted by success at other levels. For a bit, Brooke Henderson was driving the Canadian sports narrative by doing really well at the LPGA, and rightfully so. Brooke Henderson is a phenomenal golf player. For a bit, you had Leylah Fernandez and Bianca Andreescu and Milos Raonic and Denis Shapovalov and Felix Auger-Aliassime driving the tennis narrative, but it seems like those moments have kind of plateaued as well. And I feel bad for Bianca Andreescu, who's been dealing with injury problems, and Leylah Fernandez is doing very well, but you see that fever pitch of attention starting to wane a little bit, and it'll pick up again once they start winning championships again. But that has seemed to quiet down a bit. And then, of course, congratulations to the FIBA men's basketball team,
Third place,
right? Their first ever medal at a FIBA tournament and qualifying for the Olympics. Like, that is huge. And of course,
it's been a long time.
Oh, absolutely. But then again, you also have still that remnant of that basketball. And I'm not just talking like, the regular fans, like the real fans, right? Because they're always going to be there. But I'm talking about the casual fans. I'm talking about the ones who really only pay attention when a team in their city or their country starts to do well. Those fair weather fans, the bandwagon jumpers, there's still that leftover hype from the Raptors championship, and the Canadian men's team has been doing very well, and FIBA's been doing a very, very good job of pushing and promoting that team as well. And you do have some of the best players in the world on the Canadian team right now. You think about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like, doing so well and making such a name for himself. Like, Canada's making noise, and that's great. And I think that is actually a benefit for Canada soccer right now, because if they're trying to figure ish out, then the less attention on the flailing, if you will, or the problems, if people are paying attention to Canada basketball, right, as they rightfully should, and the CEBL too, pulling that national level, the same way the CPL is for soccer. If the fair weather fan attention is on the basketball team, then the soccer team has the almost the anonymity to be able to work it all out.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's how Canada soccer, I think they should do exactly how Canada basketball is actually doing for the market, how they're basically making more attention into it. But like you mentioned about about, for example, players in the Toronto FC, and about the Canadian, even for the Canadian players abroad. You would say, like for Canadian CBL players that might not get attention to make it to the national team. But to be honest, like you have Victor Latorre. He played. He was in the national team. He's playing for Ross County in Scotland. Even to mention that is Dominic Zator playing in Poland. And right now, I've heard there's Calgary FC already just made a transfer of one of their players, young player. He's playing in Liga 2. So there is a lot of good market in the Canadian Premier League.
Oh, I mean, the thing is, it doesn't matter really at what level the players are playing, if long as they're there when it matters. I mean, you take a look at Canada basketball again. For a stretch, some of their best players never made it to the NBA. You know, like you had players from the Carleton Ravens, who arguably were one of the best Canadian university basketball teams at the time, filling the national roster. Now, of course, you've got like NBA talent getting in there as well, and that's great. But I mean, if the best player available to you just happens to be from be playing in a league in a foreign country, or playing in a league that doesn't necessarily have the prestige of like the professional leagues, that doesn't matter. But the thing is, you need to be able to fill that roster, make it play well together, and make sure that off field issues don't interfere with on field performance.
Like, I agree with that, but you don't usually see the Canadian Premier League players usually go that much to Major League Soccer. That much. Usually we see John Waterman, and usually Lucas McNaughton, Kadeem Chung. That's usually what we see in the go to the Major League Soccer. Not that really that much,
right? But I mean, it stands to reason that if you're looking to get players to come into TFC, you're going to look at fully professional leagues. And I'm not saying this is not a diss on CPL, because it's some damn good soccer, but if you have the choice between a player who is playing in the CPL right now and a player who's playing maybe in the Bundesliga or the English Premier League or Serie A, and bringing them over, then of course you're going to snag from one of those, top tier pro leagues from across the pond, because they're playing at a high level, and you want someone to be able to come in who's used to a high level. That's why you were seeing players like Messi, coming over to MLS, and just like David Beckham before him, right? Like players who
even teammates that play with Lionel Messi in Barca.
Yeah, absolutely, right? But I mean, it's going from pro level to pro level, right? You have got to be, and this is why part of me still wishes that CPL was somehow a feeder league for MLS, because then you'd have players, who are playing in, like Forge and Ottawa and York with a direct line to the pros, right? And I think that's the difference, right? CPL feels on an island unto itself, whereas you take a look at the hockey, right, or even basketball, right? You've got the NBA G League, which is basically
development,
exactly, right? You have the AHL, which gets fed into from Canadian Hockey League, and you've got like the American collegiate system, so you're seeing direct lines to the pro level, and you're not seeing that with the CPL. Yeah, occasionally a player is going to get picked up because they are that damn good, but it's the exception rather than the norm. And at least with the AHL in hockey, you're one step from the NHL. right? All it takes is a player to go down and you can get called up. And I wish there was that situation where if a player went down, if you didn't have an adequate enough player currently on your roster, be able to call up from one of those teams. But, then you have, then it becomes almost like a feeder league. And yes, you have MLS, too. You got TFC too, so you have that level. But if the CPL were to feed into TFC2 or something like that, or like the secondary teams for Montreal or Vancouver or something like that, this is just me kind of wishing that the CPL was a bit more direct line to professional leagues. But that being said, you still have a quality product on pitch, and if fans are dismayed at all by what could happen with the national team, start watching the CPL because you'll be happy again.
And basically, you see some potential players.
Oh, absolutely.
Even how potential the league could grow. For example, maybe be good in the market, getting some teams.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're seeing something that most likely will not happen to getting a team is in Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm.
There was news that this team in Saskatoon, for the Living Sky Sports and Entertainment, officially basically being adjourned for it. So basically having it a halt for it, or could be, well, we're not going to be doing the project. So a lot of things going around.
And this feels like kind of what we were talking about with the national team, where money is the answer to and root cause of all problems. You have this situation where, like back in February, they were basically burdened with a $10 million lawsuit, and there's this burden on Saskatchewan taxpayers for a $28 million stadium, where I don't see why they don't just sit there and say, hey, why don't we just play Mosaic Stadium, where the Rough Riders play. But I mean, here's the problem, right? The CPL is doing okay right now.
Yeah,
right.
With 8 teams.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, how do you expand to improve the game if it's going to detract or become a problem, right? You had, we're a year away from, a year back from Edmonton being, having to drop out of CPL, be replaced with Vancouver. Here you have a situation where Saskatchewan had basically a failure to launch at this point. And maybe now is not the time to be expanding. Money is tight all over the place, and you're seeing it in all aspects of everyday life. And, unless you are an established professional league, right? Like the CFL, right? And Saskatchewan, if the Rough Riders ever had a problem, I'm sure the people of Saskatchewan were like, well, we can't lose our Rough Riders. We've seen that happen too many times in Ottawa for us to want to see that happen with Saskatchewan. Ottawa, you're looking at like, the Riders, and then the Renegades, and the Red Blacks. It was so stop and go in Ottawa. At least now they seem to have everything figured out. But I mean, how long has the CFL been talking about an Atlantic franchise? I mean, hell, they're still doing Touchdown Atlantic, but the reality is, any new team in any market, in any new market, is going to, in any league, is going to come at a cost to the taxpayers. And do the taxpayers want to foot the bill for that? This isn't saying that they don't want a soccer team. I'm sure the people of Saskatchewan would love their own CPL team. However, how much are they willing to pay for it? Sure, they'll pay whatever the ticket cost is going to be, $20, $30, whatever. Yeah, sure, I'll go watch a soccer game for that. But, oh, by the way, you as a taxpayer are also on, footing the bill for a $28 million stadium. Oh, well, I'd buy a ticket at a stadium that doesn't exist, but I'm not going to pay for the stadium just so I can buy a ticket there. Especially when people are struggling right now with money, right? You have people with, food insecurity. Can I afford to feed my family? You have people working multiple jobs so they can feed their families. You have cost of gas making everything expensive. You have interest rates sky high. Like it's not good. And right now, to sit there and say, well, as much as you may want this team, there's an inherent cost to it. Plus, to the same token as well, there are only so many soccer players available for teams. And any new team is going to pull from other teams in the league, as well as, from League One Canada. And you may get a good team, and that'd be great. But do the finances equate to what it's going to take to field a good team? And at some point, every league gets to that critical mass, right? Where the amount of money that the team and the league are able to bring in through ticket sales and merchandise can only afford so much. I think if Saskatchewan had come in with a plan, like a field sharing plan or a stadium sharing plan with the Rough Riders, so Saskatchewan FC, we'll call it for argument's sake, would play on weekends, on off, or on weeks where the Rough Riders are on the road. A little bit of juggling there, right? I mean, we talked about this with Halifax too, right? And the problems they're having with Wanderers Ground, and they're going to have to find a way to either find a different pitch or build their own stadium. And again, that's going to be, where do we build in Halifax? And do the taxpayers want to pay for it? And I'll tell you this right now: any politician who thinks that their constituents aren't really keen on the idea of paying for a stadium, the politicians aren't going to push it. If the fever is there and the passion is there, you're going to get politicians behind it. But if they're not, the politicians aren't going to touch it. And you kind of need that perfect storm to sell a stadium for a team that doesn't exist. Halifax is in a bit different situation. The Wanderers are there. The Wanderers are a known commodity. They've been around long enough. And refresh my memory, but I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, the Wanderers won that tournament during the 2020 COVID era.
Yeah, League games.
Exactly.
No, they were runner-ups.
Although I knew they were in the mix, but
they lost to Forge FC.
Yeah. See, I knew I need my memory refreshed, but they were in the mix, right? And the thing is, the Wanderers have become like their team, right? Along with the Mooseheads, right? And if the Mooseheads needed an arena upgrade, well, you know what? The Mooseheads are a staple in the community. Yes, they're going to do that. The Wanderers, they've started to build that up. They're a known commodity. With Saskatchewan, the team doesn't even exist, so you don't even know the people are going to be interested in going. It's a hard sell.
Yeah, I think that why not start that from easy? And to be honest, this is basically a group that owns a baseball team, which is the Regina Red Sox, and their second route was, hey, we could have Regina first or Saskatoon. They decided we're gonna take the Saskatoon route into it, and you don't even know where to start at this point. You're going to take this whole thing to a hard route, to this whole development of getting a expansion team. You could have done this like to gain attraction to fans, and basically have the finance to make a stadium for Saskatoon.
I mean, and there's the thing too, right? Like, you take a look at Atletico Ottawa, right? And they're playing in a TD Place, same place as the Red Blacks. And
that's basically exactly who the owner, Jeff Hunt.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing.
He owns the Red Blacks.
Yeah. And there's the thing. If you are trying to put a new team into a situation where you have, either the same owner or a symbiotic relationship, right? Where the pitch is ready. All you need to do is put nets on instead of goalposts. Then guess what? You've taken the biggest hurdle out of the equation, and that's where does the team play, right? With Atletico Ottawa, it's an easy situation. You have Jeff Hunt, who owns and runs the Ottawa 67s, like one of the premier,
and the Red Blacks.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like you're talking Mr. Sports, really, in in Ottawa, and
even Bobby Young.
Yeah, you have
for Hamilton,
right, and again, you have people who know what they're doing in these cities with facilities to be able to accommodate them. That's like you go down to Lansdowne, quote unquote, right, the TD place. Like you've got the 67s playing there. You've got the Red Blacks. I was going to say Renegades again. What year is this? And then you've got Atletico Ottawa, all in the same area, and that's just smart, right? You have, you got the Ticats and you got Forge playing in the same stadium, right? The infrastructure costs are gone, which means that all the money that's needed is put towards the team because the facility is there. And the facility is being funded by more than one team, so renovations to the facility are taken care of as well. Like, it's just smart.
Even promoting the team of who's interested in going to their games.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, if you take a look at who's running things, right? Like, this is one of those situations where if the owner of the Saskatchewan Roughriders were to
be involved,
exactly, then all of a sudden you have a decent situation. I think that's where the next big level needs to be, is that you need to almost have a partnership. Like if the CPL and the CFL were able to form some kind of partnership where the fields are shared, right? Then all of a sudden you have a decent facilities are no longer in question.
Well, yeah, it's 3.
Yeah. But I mean, like, let's say Montreal were to get a CPL team somewhere down the road, right? If they happen to play at the same stadium as the Alouettes, then that's brilliant, right? If somehow Toronto were to get a CPL team,
another one, you mean?
Well, yes, I'm not counting York as Toronto in this sense, but yes.
It's North York.
It's
part
exactly
of the Greater Toronto area,
right? But let's say, for argument's sake, right? You have a major Toronto team, right? And the GTA has proven that it can have multiple teams, right? I mean, in the CEBL you had
Scarborough,
but you also have Brampton, originally Hamilton, but you have Brampton now. While Brampton's slightly further out, it's still close enough, right? But I mean, Toronto is a large enough market that you could have two CPL teams very easily. There also by creating, your typical kind of GTA derby, if you will.
Actually, it's kind of hilarious about it. If you were talking about hockey, there was a possibility that can we bring in Toronto Marlies? Because how popularity hockey is in Toronto.
Well, the thing with the Marlies is that even with them, occasionally they get to play at Scotiabank Arena. They occasionally get to play where the Leafs play, and every time they do, like, the games are sold out. Occasionally, Belleville gets to come up to Ottawa and play at the Canadian Tire Center, right? And those games usually are very well attended. Can you imagine, right? A hypothetical Toronto CPL team against York, where TFC plays.
Well, like for example, we usually see them during the Canadian Championship.
Right, exactly, right? But that's the thing. You have facilities available to you. Um, and if any market wants to be able to bring in a CPL team, right? Whether it be a Saskatchewan or a Montreal or any other Atlantic province, right? Or in, wherever, right? Winnipeg, per se, right? Um,
Well, we have Winnipeg playing for the where the Blue Bombers play.
Well, exactly, right? Like,
IG Field.
Exactly. Or if you want a team back in Edmonton, right? Pair them up with the Elks, right?
Well, those were the owners who basically failed with the FC Edmonton.
Yeah. I mean,
that was a problem.
It's never going to be easy.
But the real problem was it was this where they played. That was the issue.
Mm-hmm.
That the commissioner said, "Nah, we can't. We have to shut it down because it's not professional enough of playing at Clark Stadium."
Well, I mean, if you don't, it doesn't even necessarily need to be, teamed up with the CFL. If the university in a town is large enough and has the facilities enough to be able to provide for a CPL team, and my first thought is Laval. The Rouge et Or are historic.
Yeah,
Canadian university football franchise. There, you have that ability to be able to use those facilities if Laval becomes your Quebec-based team. There are those kind of options as well, and that would open up the door to places like Windsor or Waterloo or any other Western university. Like, you have those facilities, and you take a look at Pacific, right? It's not a big pitch, it's not a lot of stands. It's not like they're playing at a proper football stadium, but it's packed, right? And you had that problem too with the Argos and the Alouettes in the CFL, where they were playing in the Dome and Olympic Stadium respectively, and it's like, yeah, well, we're playing here, but like there's like a quarter of the stadium filled and it's empty and it looks bad, and then all of a sudden you have the Argos playing at BMO Field, and you have Montreal playing at a smaller stadium, and it looks packed, and the hype is there.
Well, usually they use this. Usually use these places if the market is there. If it's not good for the market of bringing that much fans, we'll find a place to see how much capacity is good for the market.
Yeah, but I mean then it goes back to the economy and the original question of, is now the time to expand in the CPL? And I would argue probably not.
Well, I think that capacity for teams it is good for the market. Like we're seeing right now in the Canadian Premier League, of each team has been on the green of the rise of capacity of fans going to it. You're seeing like three teams now averaging 5,000 in capacity going to their matches. Pacific FC really struggling right now. 1.2 below for the season.
Right. And the thing is, Victoria it's not an easy market. And I've been out there recently. My best friend actually lives out there, and the thing with the economic market in Victoria is that you have Vancouver real estate prices, but you don't have the jobs that are able to pay Vancouver real estate prices. You have a housing crisis in Victoria. Like, it's not easy. And if people are having problems paying their mortgages and their rents, especially with the Bank of Canada interest rate going up, and as people are going to have to re-up their mortgages, there's going to be questions of, can they re-up their mortgage? And when you have situations like that, and the cost of gas, right? Like today, like I gassed up last night, and it was like $1.70, and that's high, right? I put over $100 of tank or gas in my tank, but when I was in Victoria just a couple of weeks ago, it was like 205, right? You're talking like a 35 cent swing in gas price. And if you're sitting there going, well, let's see here, I can put gas in my car or I can eat, and that's if I can pay my rent or my mortgage. And then the question becomes, and how do I squeeze a Pacific FC ticket in there? Right? You chuckle, but
or maybe just walk.
Right, but it's a reality, though. It really is a reality. And, in a situation like Victoria, I worry. I do, because, and it has nothing to do with the team on the field, because Pacific is a very good team. And it's a shame, because if the people can't afford basic necessities, how are they going to afford a ticket to go see a game? And people are having to make choices. It's a reason why, unless your movie title is Barbie or Oppenheimer, people are not going to the movie theaters as much as they did, because people are having to make a choice over what to spend their dollars on, their entertainment dollars on. And a team like Pacific FC could find themselves in a very, very bad situation if the current financial situations, or at least the economic situations of the country, continue.
Well, at least right now, Pacific FC is doing well in the standings right now.
Right, but imagine, just let's hypothesize for a second here.
But imagine, like, if they're going to basically, oh, you know what, we're going to be the expansion team.
Oh, I do not. I mean, Vancouver's good. But no, okay, not on the pitch, they're not good. But I mean, they're in a better situation because they're in a very large market, right?
Yeah.
And the thing with Vancouver FC, like, I offhand don't know how much a ticket to a Vancouver FC game would be, but I'd put dollars to donuts that it's a lot cheaper than going to go see the Lions or the Canucks or the Whitecaps, right? So that's a bonus. People can afford a ticket in Vancouver because also there's good jobs in Vancouver. If Pacific were an expansion team this year, I'd be worried if they make it to the next year. And that's not on the team. That's just on the economics. But imagine, if you will, okay, what if Pacific were as bad as TFC is right now in MLS?
Or
right? And fans were getting frustrated.
Or even was worse than FC Edmonton.
Right? Oh, yeah, no, exactly. Right? And that's the thing, too. Like, Edmonton's another one of those cities where the economics are tough.
It was kind of shocking. It's kind of shocking if you look at their history with us in the CPL. Their first year in the CPL, it was not really bad.
Yeah, no.
They were I think it was they were fifth spot average in points. Halifax Wanderers were below them. It always really questions that. How did that drop? It was big, and the whole thing was FC Edmonton really struggled in their finance because of the pandemic in 2020. That was their downfall. They needed fans to go to their games, and that's how the big downfall for FC Edmonton is now. Now that whole FC Edmonton is now in the market to to see who would buy that team.
I think you're going to see any, and I hesitate to put this out there right now, right? But any attempt to bring in an expansion franchise in a smaller market, and let's be honest, right? Saskatchewan, in comparison to a city like Vancouver, is a smaller market.
Even Windsor right now.
Right. Well, exactly. Right. I mean,
it's even a question that could Windsor even make it for an expansion team?
I think the saving grace for Windsor might be the fact of their proximity to Detroit and a larger American market. And if you happen to have a decent American player or two, then there's that possibility of getting some of that cross-border soccer interest. But because it's not like Detroit has an MLS team, so you're actually near a soccer-starved market.
Detroit City FC in the USL.
Okay, I forgot about them. but consider too, right? You're going to have the ability to, and this would be very, very smart, is if there were friendlies being played between Windsor and Detroit City.
No question about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. If you get that cross-border interest, then that's a saving market. Saskatchewan, maybe not so much. But if interest rates start to come down and gas prices start to come down and food prices start to come down, because all of those are starting to hit those critical masses where people are just going to be like, I don't want it anymore. Right? I'll take the bike instead of I'll take the car. Right? I'll choose this over I'll choose that. Right now,
or try to find interest in a different country.
Right, and that's the thing, right? Right now, everything
like in Wrexham,
everything's inflated, right? Price wise, everything is inflated, and until the prices and the interest rates come down, you're going to see people making choices away from entertainment, or at least cheaper entertainment that doesn't, you go to a movie, right? Family of 4 goes to a movie, and if everyone gets popcorn, you're looking at $100 outing. It feels like some days, right? God help you if you go to an IMAX film, right? I mean, maybe you luck out if you go on a Tuesday night, where the tickets are cheaper, and you maybe sneak in a pack of candy as opposed to buying the $6-7 popcorn, right? But that's the thing, right? If the cost is too much, the people will start saying, no matter how much you like it, I don't wanna. And that's not good. So I think in maybe 2-3 years, the idea of further expansion can be revisited if the economic climate is right. But I don't think it is right now. And I think that may have been, aside from some other extenuating factors, but I mean, I think that was the death knell for the Saskatchewan bid overall, at least from a community perspective as opposed to a business perspective.
Yeah. We can focus for this season's Canadian Premier League is almost coming to a close for all 8 teams, closing in for four matches left or 5 matches left. Battle for most likely for that fifth spot.
Right. And if you take a look at the standings, I mean, as of the morning of, as we're recording this on Sunday, the September to the 10th, the distance between 2nd and 6th is 4 points. Yeah. And that's it. Like, it's a log jam.
And that's the battle to make that spot for the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah. And, really, the interesting fights are going to be.
It's not just that. You have Forge FC, even possibility to be that first spot. Calgary FC, Pacific FC.
Oh yeah, no, it's tight. It's tight. Really, only Vancouver and Valor are on the outside, and
even Halifax Wanderers.
Yeah,
But I mean, I do question Atletico Ottawa though. Even York United, not even will struggle in trying to make that top 3.
Well, I mean, you have to take a look at how they are going down the stretch. And York in their last 4 are 2 wins, 2 losses, right? Halifax, only 1 loss in their last 5 matches. So they're putting points on the board, and that's what matters. Ottawa, however, and you're right, winless in their last 3. Like, they're struggling at the worst possible time, and the clock is ticking down, and the margin for error is shrinking rapidly. Ottawa cannot afford to struggle down the stretch, and all eyes should literally be on that October 1st matchup against York United.
It's kind of hilarious going to see that match. I even went to I did see that Halifax Wanderers versus York United match. There's always been those complaints about that match. Everyone always says, bring in that VAR. Always bring that VAR. We want that VAR.
But I mean,
but York United did good.
Yeah.
Even Daniel Henry, his first starting match, he did really well.
The thing is, you can't take a look at the remaining schedule and sit there and say, oh, you know, we got a match against Vancouver. Well, that's going to be an automatic win. Yeah, go ask Ottawa about that one, right?
Oh yes, every single time when every single team that plays on Halifax Wanderers soil, you say Wanderers grounds, they always think it's going to be really tough, and Wanderers always says we're going to win instantly. But everyone knows that you can't just say that every single time because they were playing at home. You have to play all the way to the 90 minute.
Right. I think I don't think there's any
no question about it that they play really well at home.
Right. I mean, if you take a look at those top 6 teams, right? Valor and Vancouver are afterthoughts at this point. But I think
Valor and Vancouver. And Vancouver could actually be no chance to make it to the 5th spot
mathematically
for the next week.
Yeah.
Upcoming matches. So it's the question mark for it's always that question marks for York United, Valor FC, how they play for the upcoming matches. Even Atletico Ottawa and even the top 4 teams.
Yeah. I mean, I would be hard pressed to see Cavalry Pacific or Forge find themselves in a situation where they're on the outside looking in. I think you're really looking at the trifecta of Halifax, Ottawa, and York. Halifax.
That would be a really shocking one if York United does not do well in their last matches. That's really if we see Valor FC just win their last matches and Atletico Ottawa and York United just we're not doing well, but still Atletico Ottawa, York United versing each other at York Lions Stadium, is it going to be a draw, or we're going to see Atletico Ottawa or York United just lose?
Yeah, I mean, if
to basically actually close everything from 7th and 8th teams.
I was about to say, if you're looking at a situation where Ottawa and York are tied at 5 and 6 in the standings when October 1st rolls around, there is every possibility that match could be the absolute match of the year.
That's, or you would say the best. I wouldn't say it would be the best match. I think, or you would say
has the potential of the best match, at least
best rivalry match.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, the thing is,
and the closing.
But it could be a non-factor though,
and you might say, in the closing match is who gets the first place.
Right. But the thing with Halifax though is they're not exactly out of the woods. And you take a look at their last 5 games that they have in their schedule. Yes, you have a match against Vancouver and Valor, but I mean, those two teams could sit there and say, what do we have to lose? Or they could just play spoiler. But you also have games against Cavalry Forge and Ottawa. And you have the potential that if Halifax falters anywhere in those 5 games, then it could be them eventually in the 6th spot if York and Ottawa can still kind of keep their heads above water. The worry about York is that of the 6 teams that are currently,
battling for 5th.
exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. York is the only one with a negative goal differential.
Yeah, and it does actually leads them a possibility to not even make for 5th if it stays like this.
So, help me out here. If by chance you have a 3-way tie for 4th, 5th, and 6th, where's the tiebreaker start?
Goal differentials.
So York really does have to step it up because, I mentioned margin of error for Ottawa.
So it would basically have to be York United win your games
and win them handily
by a large margin of goals.
Yeah, because I think they're -8 or something like that in goal differential. Like it's, and everyone else is on the happy side of 0 on that one.
And their worst match was Forge FC versus York United at home, 4-0.
Yeah,
Taron Campbell.
Well, you remember too the beginning of the season, and York was faltering. They
basically scored the hat trick.
Yeah, they faltered at the start. They stumbled right out of the gate. And we were sitting there going, what the heck is going on with York? And that early problem, that early stumbling block has put them in this situation right now where their own poor play at the beginning of the season could be their downfall at the end of the season, regardless of how they're playing on the pitch now. You put yourself in a hole early, and kudos for turning it around and getting to a point where York was, potentially, arguably, putting themselves in contention for a top spot in the table, and now that seems to have kind of stumbled back down.
And not just that, mishandling the under 21 minutes.
Yeah.
That was the biggest problem. And they had to loan Derizario from Toronto FC too. That plays goalie. And have to bring in Esprit for their U Sports draft pick. And more players that are under 21.
So I'm going to sit here and make you put your pontification hat on, if you will. If you're taking a look at those 6 teams that are currently, not Valor or Vancouver, who, in your opinion, finds themselves on the outside looking in at the end of the regular season?
That will not make the playoffs?
Correct.
I'm still going to have Calvary, Pacific, and Forge. Those 3 teams in the playoffs. As noticed, Calvary is right now 4 points ahead of second place and third place. But it does question if you're going to have Halifax Wanderers and Atletico Ottawa in there.
Right. So, you're looking at Halifax, Ottawa, and York. Who do you think finishes in 6th?
It really does question for fans right now. You do have Halifax Wanderers, Ottawa, and York United being that question that there is going to be that change of 4th, 5th, and 6th, but it could stay the same thing for the season. It could actually, but could York United and Atletico Ottawa change? It could actually be the ones that change the position for being 5th spot. That could be the decider. But if it stays in points, the same in a tie, you're that's going to be the goal differential to decide.
So you're, in a roundabout way, you're saying you think York is going to be on the outside looking in.
To be honest, like I really do feel sorry about York United. I do. Like all those matches really flustered them. That being mad, how they play. It really was kind of that you're not doing really well versus even Forge FC. You're not doing well versus the key games that you have to verse.
Right.
Like maybe Pacific FC and Calvary FC.
And it's not even like you can use, the first year expansion excuse like Vancouver's going to get this year.
And it's kind of shocking that Vancouver FC could actually even beat FC Edmonton's like even record of how many points they had being last.
See, that's the thing. No matter how bad you think your season is, there's always room to do worse.
It is really kind of shocking. If Vancouver FC does really well in 2022, which basically that actually was FC Edmonton, which they're basically tied with 20 points, you're most likely to see Vancouver FC doing better than FC Edmonton. They're already tied with the points.
On the upside, at least Vancouver will end the year.
But right now, they have the worst goal differential.
Oh, absolutely, right? But I mean, it's not like they didn't have some good moments on the pitch, right? Like, they're not walking out like the 2017 Cleveland Browns, who went 0-16, or the 2008 Detroit Lions, who, did the same thing. Like, there's going to be growing pains with any expansion franchise, and at least the Vancouver market, I think, will be able to sustain those early rough years. But it is with York United, I think it is going to be very much a case where you stumble out of the gates and you're playing catch up. But no matter how good you do, that early start may be the thing that sinks them. Unless Ottawa continues to falter, because that's the thing. York has been playing well as of late, and Ottawa has stumbled. So the pressure, I think, is on York to succeed and to win. And if they can win and not settle for draws, or Ottawa continues their stoppage minute losses, if you will, it's going to be tight, and there's not a lot of room left.
Yeah. And it does question a lot of who's going to be that 6 team, who's going to be in 6, and those 5 teams make it to the playoffs.
Well, I think the other factor here is that Ottawa has a game in hand on York.
Yeah.
So,
but do you who you think that is going to not make the playoffs?
Oh, I still think it's York who falls on the outside. And it could very well be a situation where the two teams are still tied in points, and it's that goal differential. Because, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, even if Ottawa loses every game by 1 point, by 1 goal, they still find themselves with the better goal differential. So if Ottawa and York find themselves tying all the way down the stretch, Ottawa still goes up by 1 with the game in hand, right?
If York United loses all their matches,
right? But even if Ottawa and York tie the rest of the way down the stretch every game, right, including October 1st when they play against each other, right, then Ottawa with the game in hand still goes up a point, taking the possibility of York advancing out of the equation, even on goal differential, right? So, Ottawa's got a low margin of error. Halifax has a low margin of error. York United have 0 margin for error.
Well, Ottawa 32 points. York United 32 points.
But with a game in hand for Ottawa, right? Yeah. That's the key. If that one game if that one game means Ottawa gets that one extra point, or they're lucky 3 points, right? Like then it may not be a factor at all.
Like those other. It's just the other matches.
Exactly.
Only cares.
York's got 4 kicks at the can. Ottawa's got 5.
Yeah, but do you see Calgary FC winning that regular season?
I don't hate that call. I really don't hate that call. Cavalry has done very well. Pacific, I think Pacific's going to find themselves in that 3-4. It's Cavalry and Forge's world, and everyone else is living in it.
It's always going to be that Forge FC and Pacific FC. Always going to be the two teams who will try to make that margin. But
of course, as Forge has proven time and again, it doesn't matter where you finish in the standings. All you have to do is make it to the dance.
Forge FC just has to win those last 4 games. That's all they have to do, and see how Calvary FC do well in their last matches.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, Cavalry can't go into cruise control down the stretch. It's still, I don't see a world where Cavalry finds themselves looking at the 6th spot, but I don't see, they still can't take their foot off the pedal.
Yeah, Forge FC just versed Calvary FC. Not a good match to make a decision of who makes that 3 points. And Forge FC needed those 3 points to get closer and even make it to 2nd spot.
But again, it doesn't matter whether you win the table, it's whether you win it all. And, Forge has proven that as long as they're
close
in the dance, they have a chance.
Yeah. Halifax Wanderers staying 4th?
I don't think it's the games against Cavalry and Forge that they need to really worry about, right? Because it's those games against Valor and Vancouver that are on their schedule. And I mean, and Ottawa too, to a point, because of course, any win there is going to be able to, solidify themselves away from that 6th spot. But I mean, if you play down to your competition against Valor or Vancouver, or they decide to play up to their competition, it's always those games that are quote unquote perceived wins that are going to be dangerous for you.
Yeah, and to be honest, Atletico Ottawa is going to struggle. Is going to have that big pressure with Halifax. They're going to be in Vancouver Islands.
Yeah.
And then later, you're going to see Atletico Ottawa most likely going to be versing York.
Yeah. Well, yeah, October 1st, right? So
and
Ottawa needs to pick up the pace. They need to tie or they need to win. And they cannot allow stoppage time lapses in judgment like they did against Vancouver.
Yeah, it was the biggest error from Johnny Dos Santos.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't make those kind of mistakes. Hoping the best of those teams, trying to make those that playoff spot, and that's full time of the Red Blue Car. I'm your host Jacob, selling out.